This is Marco Reus, and you're listening to the Yellowwallpod podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 309 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's 3-3 draw against RB Leipzig, and we will preview the Friday night game, which is tomorrow against Hoffenheim. And for all that and more joins me Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias, how are you doing?
Hey Stefan, I am doing well. How are you doing in this festive period?
Yes, it's Christmas time. We have a nice little Christmas tree with Joel Embiid as the Christmas tree topper. So I'm doing very well, even though the Sixers suffered their very first home loss last night. All these things are things we're discussing right now because we actually did not have any pre-chat because sometimes we can keep all our powder dry and ramble already in the pre-talk. But Matthias, now that we have basically skipped that, everything is on the record now. So, how did you like the 3-3 draw against Leipzig? After 2-3 days, how are you feeling? What's your emotional status?
Well, I mean, kind of similar to what I said right after the match. I mean, I was the only one.
So it still stinks.
Well, no, I mean, I was the only one in the panel that said Dortmund would lose. You guys all agreed that it would be a draw.
That's right.
I
also predicted
you predicted a loss. That's right.
But I've already prepared a line in my head because, some, like half the panel predicted a loss, and half the panel predicted a draw, and in the end, all four were right because Dortmund lost 3-3.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that happened, but I will say, some people kind of went off the deep end again, as one does. But to say that Dortmund lost a 3-3 against, as Konstantin Eckner tells him, the best team in the Bundesliga right now, that's actually a really positive statement to make. Especially when you look at the context of the match. Yes, mistakes happen. They do happen, of course. Julian Nagelsmann kind of jokingly said about Timo Werner, thank God he's so lazy, because he just didn't come out of the offside position, which is a place he rarely leaves, which is part of his strength, obviously, is that speculating on that ball. And, the weather.
Man, I also need to find a job where my laziness is my strength.
And you get paid millions in the process.
Yes.
It was so crazy, really, when you think about it, from an amazing first half to really what was an amazing second half just because of the craziness, and then the torrential downpours, which I believe played a huge factor for both sides, because in the second half, people were sliding everywhere.
It was a kalte Dusche, what we say in Germany, like metaphorically, if things go from if you're shocked, basically, like the ice bucket challenge or whatever, because on Fox Sports 2 you could see they were showing the players as they walked back on the pitch, and when the Dortmund players came from the player tunnel and saw the torrential rain, you could literally see in their faces how they really disliked that, because and I'm projecting a lot here but I think if you just played this sort of half, you do not want anything to change, especially not the conditions. And then when you come out and there's already visible change, as in increased rain, which, it was already raining in the first half, if I'm not mistaken, but then it was like torrential downpour. I think that already did something psychologically to them. I don't know, but people that do sports are weird, so I feel like I'm not going too far off if I make this presumption.
No, you don't. Weather has an impact on how you play. And it had an impact on Leipzig as well in the second half, but it obviously played to their advantage. you and I had kind of messaged at halftime via WhatsApp, and you said, wait for the long ball. And the moment I saw Forsberg off and Nkunku on, I was like, okay, yeah, they're definitely going for a significantly more direct, higher pace play because they've taken their only playmaker off, their true playmaker. But the second half is its own chapter and subplots that we can still get to. But back to the original question of how I feel, very, very positive. I mean, there was way more positive than negative in the game. And, let me put this pretty much out there immediately for those that slam me on Twitter for quote unquote, being a fanboy of my guy Bürki and there he goes making a mistake. Not only did he make two great saves just before the half, after the mistake, he made what even Jens Lehmann classified as a world-class save off of a corner, I believe it was. It was pretty much point-blank range. So, you know what? Lay off of him. I've seen Manuel Neuer, who over the last 10 years has been the best German keeper, actually make that pretty much same mistake that Bürki made in dry conditions. In fact, he actually headed it straight to the feet of an opposing player who played it into the goal. So, chill the hell out with Bürki. He saved the point at the end of the day as much as obviously he contributed to it, even though I think his error is nowhere near as egregious as that what Julian Brandt did. But again, that's the second half. Let's look at the first half. And how did you see the first half, Stefan?
So, in judo or wrestling, when there's, you stand in the ring or whatever it's called, that square, and you start off with the hand ringing before someone gains control and wrestles the other person to the ground, right? And I thought this is sort of how the first half in the beginning played out, where it was very disruptive. Both teams pressed and were very aggressive. And then it was Dortmund pushing Leipzig to the ground and keeping them in the headlock or whatever, because it was amazing to see the pace, the precision, and the control that Dortmund exuded over what we have described the best team in Germany right now. Leipzig were absolutely stunned, and I think Gulaschi said it after the game that in the first half they were too passive, where that passiveness was forced upon them by Dortmund. You could see how, and we saw the same phenomenon with Mainz before in Düsseldorf too, where in the first minutes they start to annoy Dortmund, they start to disrupt, but at some point Dortmund catch their flow and then it's game over. And that same thing I did not expect to happen happened. I did not think that Dortmund would be on this level. And I was so positively surprised that I usually would have been jumping through the living room had I not been glued to the edge of my seat, because it was such an amazing brand of football that Dortmund played in the first half. Exactly what I personally want to see. Is where if they lose the ball, they try to regain it quickly, but more importantly, they move it at such speed and with such finesse that the opponent, who, Leipzig are still a good pressing team, even though maybe not as good as they were before under Nagelsmann, it was just a sight to behold. And I thought, if Dortmund would have played like this, months before, they'd probably be maybe 5-6 points ahead of the rest of the league now, just because of the dominance. And the key factor in this to me really is Dan Axel Zagadou, because Leipzig had no idea how to deal with Hummels, Zagadou, and Akanji, at the beginning. If we skip back all the way to the Cologne game, and then I think the defeat against Union Berlin, the biggest problem that Dortmund had was really how to play out from the back. Where do we continue when we have the ball with our center backs, and what do we do then? Because opponents really managed to shut that route off right to the defensive midfielders, and then isolated Dortmund on the fullback positions, and this sort of made things very, very difficult for Dortmund to progress the ball into that dangerous area where now Julian Brandt presides. So this makes me very happy that it took a long while, but Dortmund have come around to a tactic where opponents play, and I think Jens Lehmann said it, the right tactical setup, and still don't find a solution because the quality that Dortmund have is just so hard to deal with. Because when Zagadou steps up with that ball and plays it, a short vertical pass or whatever, this is very hard to defend. And if you try to take him out of the game, then Hummels or Akanji can do the same thing or other things that are very hurtful to you. So, this is really, Dortmund have found a solution to how to really highlight their own quality and basically put your opponent in front of an unsolvable puzzle, which is what the ideal scenario is. So I was just very happy in how fluid it was and how quick Dortmund shifted the ball. I talked about it a lot before, that the key to Dortmund's success always lies in the switch of play to move the ball quickly around from left to right. And Julian Weigl, obviously, in the past seasons has been a huge factor in this. And it's nice to see it being reinvigorated right now. There were a lot of quick diagonal balls that Dortmund played to play around Leipzig. And I thought just the way Dortmund, really dominated this game, was a signal of strength more than anything. And I will come back to the original point that I was going to make. This is my ideal Dortmund scenario, is where you intimidate your opponent, that they forget their own strengths. And I think the Westfalenstadion always plays a huge factor in that. When the crowd really roars and Dortmund plays so fast and so well, I think Leipzig had a little bit of poo in their pants. And to me, this is what Dortmund need to do all the time. And seeing them do it against the Leipzig team that had, I think, 5 or 6 wins on a run, and came there on hot, fiery form and then shit the bed so hard in the first half, that really made me happy. So it made me very unhappy how Dortmund then shat the bed in the second half with just complete brain farts. But I want to stay a little bit longer in the first half because that's our happy space here. So Matthias, after all that I just said, what are your thoughts?
Well, the thing, again, I hate referencing an ex-Schalke player in Jens Lehmann, but then again, he did win the Bundesliga with Dortmund, something he was unable to do with Schalke, he said Dortmund are doing everything right. They're progressing the ball quickly, they are switching play quickly, and positionally they're good, both when it comes to attacking flow, defensive positioning, and the counter-pressing. And Leipzig seemed paralyzed. They didn't quite know what to do, and which was really interesting. And like you said, the beginning was that hand wringing, and I remember sitting there and the nervousness building up in me watching it and going, the intensity of this game. There's no way both teams that this can keep up for 90 minutes. I was totally wrong, because the intensity did not flatten out throughout the match. And we'll get into that in the second half and all the positives, takeaways that I have from the second half. What I found was really, really interesting was, and I've kind of made a mental note of this over the last few matches, it seems, and you mentioned Zagadou, but it seemed like with the last few matches, Dan Axel Zagadou other teams are almost like acting like he's the pressing trap. Like they'll let Akanji move it to Hummels move it to Zagadou, and then they press Zagadou. And I noticed that against Mainz. I noticed that a little bit against Düsseldorf, definitely Slavia Prague, and then obviously now in this match as well. It's like once Zagadou got it, they put him under pressure. And that played to Dortmund's strengths because Zagadou, yes, he can make mistakes, but he's so chill in his whole demeanor. It's not like Sokratis or Toprak in the last few seasons who would get frantic. And it was always like, oh God, what's going to happen now? With Zagadou, you're not really worried about that because he exudes so much chillness, for lack of a better term.
You know what visual I always get is because he's so tall, his head is so high, he just doesn't see the opponent that's pressuring him. He's just like one level above that.
And yeah, and that plays into it. And what what the beauty of that is, not only is he able then, because Brandt is more on his side, Brandt drops into those holes, because Brandt's movement off the ball is, if he's not the best, he's one of the best in the Bundesliga in finding space, the right space, and not just space in terms of getting out of the cover shadows of the opponents, but he moves into a space where he can receive the ball, and then he's in a space where he can move the ball or play the ball. So it's not like he just moves away from an opponent, gets it, and the opponent is there right away. It's like he gets the ball, and there's nobody around him. And there are very few players, not saying he's Lionel Messi, but if you watch Messi, or if you watch the documentary series, I think it was on Amazon, This Is Football, where they just highlight Messi for an entire episode and follow his movement, he's able to do that. And Brandt is able to do that. Again, not saying he's Messi, but he has that quality about him. And what that does, because then even if he would play the ball back, guess who's wide open? Mats Hummels, one of the, if not the best build-up playmakers out of defense. All of a sudden, we saw Hummels playing his signature outside of the right boot pass over and over again, and it opened up even more in the second half, where he played some balls that were just amazing. It was like, oh, it's Hummels again. And Akanji with his physical, I mean, it played perfectly in that setup. And to me, the biggest positive takeaway is not just that Zagadou seems to have found his footing and is developing even more and nicely under Favre, that Favre has more confidence in him, but that honestly, over the last couple of matches, haven't really missed Axel Witsel. Weigl has played very, very well. And I think just that complement of those five, the double pivot, and then the three defenders behind him also helps Weigl, just like it helps Witsel. Witsel is still a better player than Weigl, but we haven't come out of these matches going, man, the outcome would have been so different with Witsel. Granted, there were a few resounding victories, but the match here against Leipzig, it's not like Witsel being there would have meant a Dortmund victory. That didn't really play into it. And I think that's huge for Dortmund, for Weigl, for Favre, and for Witsel, because now he can have a couple of breaks. And so those are all the high positives I pull out of the first half in particular, but the whole match in general.
Yeah, I gotta say, it was really spectacular to see how Dortmund utilized their strength on almost every position. And this is, in the end, what you really want to see. Whether Dortmund then end up making weird mistakes or not, I can almost see past it, even though it annoys me to the bone. There's no other way to put it. But yes, I think you make an excellent point about both Witsel and Delaney being out, and it still worked out. And I have to say, I was very scared before the game that Leipzig would just find a way to have Hummels and Weigl basically having to use their pace against Werner and Forsberg and Paulsen, and this could have all ended very horribly. Now in the end, Timo Werner scored a brace, but not because of that. So yeah, it's kind of weird, because you come away with this feeling like, after watching this game, you look at Dortmund, you're like, yep, this is a title contender. After I don't know how many months this season, I was never sure if they would find a turnaround, and I was never sure if this team could unleash its potential, but not now that they're doing it. You just have hope again, and you really hope that they can cling on to this, and it's not just a blip, but in the second half of the season, that this is going to be more the baseline and not the ceiling for Dortmund, even though it's going to be hard to play on that higher level, obviously. But it's just amazing how a couple of changes completely changed the entire game and complexity for Dortmund, and shows us how hard it is to find the right formula. And I'm pretty sure that other teams will eventually react to that and find ways to, pull Dortmund down again a little bit. So let's enjoy that tactical honeymoon if you want. But yeah, it's been an amazing ride these last few weeks, and it's kind of sad that it only yielded in 1 point against Leipzig. But as I said, while it's annoying that Dortmund only got a point out of this, it's also very important that they didn't lose this game. And you can easily lose against this Leipzig side. So it's very, very positive for Dortmund to have remained just 4 points behind Leipzig. So they remain catchable in the second half of the season. So to me, that's another big positive. And obviously, when we talk about mistakes, we can maybe talk a little bit about mistakes on the other side, because Peter Gulaschi also has a couple of errors next to his name, because his goalkeeping wasn't the finest on Tuesday night. He let in the Julian Weigl goal, but that being said, I think that was just very hard to save. What did you make of the 1-0 that Dortmund scored? Jadon Sancho should have put it away just briefly before, but then Julian Weigl pulls the trigger and it just swerves into the net.
Well, it was actually the perfect match that Jens Lehmann was the English color commentary guy, because I always find it extraordinarily cringeworthy when non-goalkeepers criticize goalkeepers, because it's such a unique position. It's not comparable to any other position on the field. And, when you hear ex-players, strikers, whatever, say, oh, he should have saved that, getting the perspective from one of Germany's best keepers of the previous decade, of the early 2000s, was very good, because when you, on both goalkeeper mistakes, both Gulaschi and Bürki, and because he was also, Lehmann said, I was a high risk, high reward keeper. Sometimes it paid off, sometimes it didn't, he said laughingly. And that's what happens. And he mentioned that, I found this really interesting because I never really thought about this, but he said goalkeepers today are taught to go down quicker and to speculate more. And that first goal from Weigl, Gulaschi did that, but he miscalculated two things that played in: the swerve of the ball, and when you watch it, that kind of almost like when you're skipping rocks on water, that when it's skimmed off of the wet pitch a meter or two before it got to him, that completely changes the flight of a ball. And that, all of that combined made him look like an idiot, but Gulaschi is one of the best keepers in the Bundesliga. And he just miscalculated it. Kind of like Bürki miscalculated in the second half.
I still blame the rain for that.
Yeah, I think it both played into that, and we'll obviously talk about that. But I thought that was very insightful from Jens Lehmann, something that you wouldn't have gotten if it would have been, okay, Lutz Pfannenstiel is also a former keeper, but if
we still wouldn't have gotten from Pfannenstiel,
Kevin McKenna or Ovo Moyela or anybody else. God forbid some of the in-house Fox guys, from the studio in the US, they just don't have that insight, because why would they? They're not ex-keepers. They don't care. The guy's there to stop the ball. Whereas Jens Lehmann obviously sees it from a completely different perspective. So that was good for me, because then Gulaschi didn't look as big of a bozo. But then when you really watched it in the replay, it was a very difficult shot to save. That being said, he still probably should have saved it. If he would have gone down a little bit later and speculated less, it would have been a pretty comfortable save, in fact. But because he did what he did, which Lehmann said they are taught to do these days, it was almost a predictable goal then.
Well, we also have to add that there's always an element of surprise when Julian Weigl takes a shot like that, because I don't think, Roman Weidenfeller always talked about his traffic light, where, the focus level is red, yellow or green, depending on how dangerous it is. And I don't think it's a red hot firing neon light when you have Julian Weigl taking a shot. So I just think that the concentration level is maybe not where it needs to be. So yeah. But who knows?
Well, and why would it be? I mean, that makes perfect sense. I'm thinking all the way back to a few seasons ago, Socrates' goal against Eintracht Frankfurt. And I think Kevin Trapp was in goal for Frankfurt at the time, where he also just took a shot from far away. As a keeper, you're not thinking that your central defender, and Julian Weigl is a borderline central defender, is going to take a shot. Especially a low percentage in that situation. But in general, Leipzig kind of surprised me a little bit. I think Jens Lehmann said it was Upamecano against all of Dortmund's attacking players at times is what it seemed like. And I'll be honest, that's what it seemed like. He saved their bacon more often than not. And throughout the match, I felt like there was more nervous defensive scrambling from Leipzig than from Dortmund, which I'll be honest isn't necessarily something I expected given the quality of Leipzig. So that's another positive to see even in the second half, despite one defensive positional mistake that we'll get into a little bit. But overall, Dortmund in the first half dominated. I mean, as much as you can dominate Leipzig, they dominated Leipzig, and they never put their foot off the pedal, and they honestly started
metal to the pedal.
Yeah, they started suffocated them after a while, just like they did against Mainz, just like they did against Düsseldorf, and situationally, occasionally against Slavia Prague. So no, it's all in all a great first half from everybody. I can't really single out anybody where I went, they weren't great in the first half. On Dortmund's side, everybody stayed cool, calm, and collect, which is a theme to go into, obviously, the second half with that.
I mean, what we really have to highlight is the passing the ball in the half spaces and the utilization of Hakimi and Guerrero, because Dortmund really managed, as I said, the switch of play was immense, but then when you switch the play, that you still have to pass it back into the middle. And I think this is where Leipzig exude the most pressure, and Dortmund formed the triangles very well to keep the ball, either maintain possession or actually take out Leipzig defenders and then create an opportunity. So I thought that overall the decision making in the half spaces on the sideline, entering into the half spaces, was actually quite clever, and something that I've criticized often enough on this show. But in this game is something that I personally must highlight, because I complain a lot about the lack of automatism, but I think in this game it all looked like a well-oiled machine, and I have nothing left to bitch about, really. At least if I still complain, then it's on a very high level. Obviously, there's always room for improvement. But I think that the flow these players created, and I think they were obviously carried on the confidence of the last games. But still, if you play with this pace, it is very easy to screw up and lose the ball, and especially against a team that's good on the transition. If you lose the ball frequently, A, that knocks your own confidence, and B, really puts the opponent in the game. So I really have to say props for Dortmund for not only in the first half, because I thought they also did that well in the second half, to maintain possession and not screwing up, minus obviously the blatant screw-ups. But other than that, it's not like Dortmund made a lot of really terrible errors. So the two mistakes they made were, they happened, but it's not like a structural mistake that you make or a tactical error, really. That's just poor decision making and poor luck. But overall, I thought the decision making was great. But obviously, since this is still very much a review on Brandhaif, and before we really knock him for his stupid screw up, why don't we talk about the 2-0, Matthias? I think you should describe this play by play.
I mean, I'll be honest.
If you can.
I honestly, because his movement once he got the ball was so amazing. I'll be honest, I forgot what happened to get up to the ball, getting to him, just because the way he turned, the way he made the opposition look non-existent, and then the calmness of the finish was absolutely spectacular. And I tweeted right afterwards, that's my goal of the season. Bank it already for the end of season awards. I may have to revise that after what he did in the second half. But the goal itself, obviously I could not put it as eloquently as Lars Pollmann put it on Twitter right afterwards when he said, I need to change my pants. But it was truly amazing. And it's, you see it again and again over the last few matches. There were a few moves that Brandt put in that were just, yes, he did those at Leverkusen, but since, not a ton of people watch Leverkusen, I don't have them that deeply ingrained in my psyche as, whoa, this is Brandt. It is in the past from Götze. We'd seen Götze do things like that in his previous stint at Dortmund. But Brandt has truly come into his own now as a Dortmund player. And the betting in period, I think, is come and gone. He's here. And he's playing with a level of confidence that unfortunately, I believe, also played into that second half mistake. Something that we have occasionally seen from Jadon Sancho as well. And obviously, Mr. Hollywood Pass himself, Mahmoud Dahoud. But it's hard to put it to words what Brandt did. So I will go back to, I guess, my Leo Messi comparison that I made earlier when it came to movement off the ball. And that is a Leo Messi type move and finish. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's quite amazing that he beat Upamecano of all players with that move, because he is, to me, the hardest to beat. But overall, this goal is only happened because you asked yourself, how did it happen? It happened because Dortmund really pushed Leipzig far into their own back line. Because when Brandt received that ball, there were, I think, 4 or 5 Leipzig players almost on the level of their own 6-yard box. And then it's very hard to defend, obviously. And it was the run from Jadon Sancho, like basically inside of the box from Leipzig's right side, and then he just lays it off for Brandt and just this turn. I'm one of my biggest talking points about Julian Brandt in general, and what makes him so good in defensive midfield or central midfield, is that he turns around very quickly. This is something that I've really missed since Ilkay Gündoğan, I have to say, and a real strength. And this turn in the box was just so nimble. I think he receives it, when he receives it, he's already turned 180. So basically, he receives the ball with his back to the goal, and then he does another, like in his turn, he just lays the ball around Upamecano, and then the finish with the left foot in one free flowing move is just world class. And another thing to be really happy about, because ultimately you also want this, obviously you want to create nice team goals, and in a way this was a nice team goal, but it wasn't also not a tap in. So just having this art and this skill is just pretty amazing to watch, and when it unfolds, it's just so pretty and beautiful, you just can't look away. So and I truly believe this is also a psychological factor that Dortmund should use more often if they can, because I think if you show your opponent what you can do when you're allowed to do it, they also approach games in a very different way. If they see in more and more ways how this Dortmund side can hurt you, you will obviously be more afraid, and this is ultimately always the goal. The pants shitting factor for me always needs to be high in opponents, and I think this Julian Brandt goal is not only art, but it also is another knock on Leipzig's confidence in this game. So just well done, Julian. I hope to see more of that in the future, but it's just amazing that Dortmund signed this player for, what was it, 25 million.
That's insane when you think about how much was spent on players like Schürrle and Yarmolenko and the list goes on. Well, it doesn't actually go on that long, but those are the two that jump to mind immediately.
Right. So yeah, I'm just very happy with that 2-0 because if anything, this is probably something we will see more often. And it's really a downer that Dortmund then sort of gifted away 2 goals, because I think I've said it, I don't know when, whether it was during the Tuchel era or during the Bosch era or maybe more recent, I don't know, but I feel like often, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but Dortmund is basically a world-class team that, or basically a team that plays at the top of the league that commits the errors of a relegation team. I don't know if there's a better or more elegant way to put it, but I feel like again and again Dortmund play on a very high level, and then they're like just mistakes where you don't even know where they come from. I mean, I always think back to that Mark Bartra, Roman Bürki fuck-up cooperation away to Stuttgart a couple of seasons ago. This is sort of like something that happens way too often to a team where it really shouldn't happen, and where I don't really see many reasons for it to happen, and I don't have an explanation why it happens and keeps happening, because in this game I think it was the most painful and most frustrating thing, just because you felt like this Dortmund side just ran at 10k or whatever, and Leipzig hardly got their shoes on, and then they were gifted these 2 goals for very little work on their part, so just mucho annoying.
Well, I mean, to kind of pick up that theme is, here's the big difference over the previous years, or even going back a month or 2 ago. Before, when Dortmund would give up leads like this, which they've done this season, I don't think you can compare giving up leads to Bremen and Freiburg to this, because as you had mentioned, those were structural, cohesive screw ups. That was like everybody screwed up. It was like a
organic screw-ups.
It was a complete team performance in the negative. Whereas these were taking the third goal out of it. The third goal was a little bit different, and I want to talk about that separately. But if I look at Bürki and Brandt, who over the last few weeks were 2 of the best players for Dortmund. Let's not forget Bürki not only saved Dortmund's bacon in this match a couple times, he did it against Slavia Prague, where he was absolutely amazing. Those were, and to me, Brandt's mistake was significantly more egregious than Bürki's. Bürki had to come out. The way the ball was bouncing, the way the ball was played, he had to come out aggressively. Otherwise, it would have been a 1v1, which ironically it kind of turned out to be anyway. But he had to come out. And the moment he came out, I was watching him, and in my gut, I went, he's miscalculated it. Like, the moment he was coming out, I'm like, he misjudged this. 9 times out of 10 in the past, he's gotten it right. And he got it right a couple of times already in this match, but he got it wrong that time. And part of it, he misjudged the bounce and flight of the ball. And then on top of it, of course, everything was sopping wet. He still got the ball, but he didn't get it cleanly with his head, and that's why it ricocheted in a way that it did to the very lazy Timo Werner, who still had a little bit to do. I mean, Bürki, it's not like Bürki just stopped. Timo Werner did have to, be on switch and make a finish, because otherwise Bürki would have stopped him. And this finish was significantly harder than what would happen with Brandt, because Brandt's back pass caught everybody off guard.
That's what we call a Schnittstellenpass in German.
Exactly.
Because it was right in the channel.
It was a perfect assist, really, and everyone was caught off guard because of all the players. You wouldn't really expect him to play a ball like that in a situation like that. Whereas Bürki's miscalculation, I'm not going to call it like a total brain fart, it was Leipzig were already attacking. I mean, there was danger in the air, so everybody was already switched on to the danger, whereas there was no danger. There was nothing. It was, Brandt, I don't even remember if he was really put under much pressure.
Yeah, he was. He was put under pressure by Paulsen, I think.
But not to a degree that you would play that pass.
No,
he had outlets left and right of him with Zagadou and Guerrero was even further out, and then Hummels was there. I mean, of all the places he could have passed the ball, that was definitely the one place he shouldn't have. And I think part of it was not complacency, maybe overconfidence, and maybe that's the good thing that you can pull out of this. You know, hey, Julian, you may be amazing, but you kind of got to get focused all the time. And I messaged you. I said he channeled his inner Dahoud in that moment, because obviously he's well known for doing that. Or Sancho, a few, matches ago, would do that too. Do stupid dribbles deep in your own third where it's like, well, what are you doing? Especially against a side like Leipzig, you can't do that. So that to me is the one of the three mistakes. That was the most egregious because it was by far the most preventable. Bürki's mistake wasn't entirely preventable. Maybe if he would have come out,
it would have been preventable had he fucking stayed in goal.
Well, no, he would have been. It would have been a 1-on-1.
Akanji had it covered though, so that's the problem.
I'm not sure if he did.
He did.
And you,
I'm sure.
But as a keeper, you have to. Again, we're going back to they have to speculate, and this time he speculated wrong. And but if he would have come out like a half second late, I mean, like not even a half second, a split second later, the ball would have hit him flush on the forehead because it kind of hit him on the top of the head. And so that's why things kind of happened the way they did. And then the third mistake, that was just Guerrero being positionally unaware defensively, which we know is a huge, huge hole in his game, is his positional awareness defensively. And that's what led to that third goal. I think it's insane. Before I turned off the TV, I saw man of the match, Patrick Schick, and I'm like, really? Schick? Man of the match? Because he scored a gifted goal. Now, he had more to do than Timo Werner, but I could think of a few players on the Dortmund side. But that's why man of the match awards are usually complete bullshit. But that, again, of the three mistakes, if you're going to grade them, worst to least worst. Worst was Brandt. Bürki was kind of in the middle, and least worst was Guerrero because it's not inevitable, but it's we know that's his mistake. That's what he can do. Positionally, he was just wrong. But the positive of it all was I felt Dortmund were much closer to scoring a fourth goal than Leipzig. And what was important was how Dortmund reacted. In previous, when they went through their mini slumps last season and kind of the middle part of the Hinrunde this season, you would see the heads drop, the shoulders drop. But ever since Hertha, that hasn't happened. And it was ready. It was ripe for them to drop their heads and Leipzig to steamroll them because Leipzig were back in the game. They had momentum and they were pressuring Dortmund. But then, of course, Dortmund said no. We kept on attacking. Sancho scored his goal. And at that point, it seemed more like Dortmund were going to get 3 points rather than Leipzig get a point. Of course, you had that one mistake, but Dortmund still had chances. Sancho coming off injured was very unfortunate because he was playing well, but they still had their opportunities. You think of the positions that Nico Schulz found himself in when he came on. There were still enough opportunities to get 3 points, but of course, Upamecano played. If you're going to pick a Leipzig player for man of the match, it's kind of going to have to be Upamecano because he danced around 3 or 4 Dortmund players in one time where I'm like, if he loses the ball in that situation, you've got 4 Dortmund players in on goal. And there were a number of breakaway chances again that Dortmund just didn't quite finish right. And so if there's a critique really, and I'm taking the brain farts out of it because they're just so freaky. A critique point really was in the second half that they didn't finish off the moves quite as clinically as they did in the first half or in a couple of the previous matches.
Yeah. One thing I would like to say about that Bürki situation where he headed the ball away. First of all, if he hits the ball in any other way with his forehead, then it will probably not land where Timo Werner is because there were enough Dortmund players in that vicinity. I said before that Akanji had it covered, but I still think that Bürki made the right call. Let's remember what happened because it was just a long punt by Gulaschi that was then flicked on by Paulsen or whoever, and it was basically a nothing ball, and so it's annoying, but My one criticism is, and I will repeat what Jens Lehmann said, because he said that Akanji basically and all the other guys around Bürki, but mostly Akanji, they all trusted that Bürki got this one right. And Akanji basically stopped in his tracks. And as I said before, I thought Akanji would have had it covered had Bürki not come out. But that being said, he still maybe should have not switched off and just stopped. Maybe he could have still done something, because hitting the goal from that far out isn't all that easy as it may look. So this is my tiny criticism there. Maybe don't switch off, and as Lehmann said, you have to think more negative. You have to assume even more errors of your teammates so you can prevent that. But otherwise, I very much agree with you. When we look at this first half of the season and the many errors and problems that Dortmund had, first of all, I think the biggest issue was that they could not defend their lead. I don't have the number in front of me right now, but I think the expected goals against that Dortmund had once they were 1-0 up were just completely outrageous. And I need to look up the numbers again, but now I think it's much, much better, needless to say, because Dortmund haven't collapsed that badly. And I think this is a big change in attitude over time that Dortmund have gone through, and is obviously a development that happens gradually. But, you know, in many ways you can be proud of this team, because I think at the start of the season, in the first weeks, when they were 1-0 up or 2-1 or whatever, they became far too conservative and sat back and basically invited all that pressure. And then a lot of annoying draws happened, like away to Freiburg or Frankfurt or the one against Bremen, like just very unnecessary, you feel. But you nevertheless have to make this development in character and in attitude, and Dortmund, I think, have gone through that. And the second part that I will want to highlight is that Dortmund have managed to become much better at set-piece defending, given that Roman Bürki, I think, had to make a couple of very good saves against Leipzig and against Slavia in recent games. But I think overall we can state that Dortmund's set-piece defending has become much better. And so now there is one lingering question that's burning inside of me, and I know I will never get an answer, so all I can do is inviting Matthias to speculate about this. But there was a quote by Julian Weigl after the Leipzig game where he said that basically the formation or tactic or whatever he referenced was something they worked out together with the coaching staff and with the, I guess, Spielerrat, what would you translate it? The players,
player council, for lack of a better term.
Council. Yeah. I don't really have a better term, but I already had a hunch that maybe the set piece defending improved once a Hummels or whoever put his foot down, and the players really determined that something needs to change, and then they changed it. Like, I thought the desperation was so high that eventually they were hurt. I don't know. I wasn't there. Again, speculation on my part. But if I hear Weigl say something like this, I feel like this is not 100% Lucien Favre, who said obviously it was his intuition, but I think that the players had a role to play in Dortmund's turnaround, just not on the field, but also off the pitch, and basically the amount of thought going into what Dortmund are now. So that's just my part of speculation, because I really don't know, but it's still an ominous quote coming out of Julian Weigl's mouth. So what do you make out of this?
Yeah, I mean, all of it is speculation, but my strong assumption, Lucien Favre is known to work well with players. There really aren't, in his history, a lot of players went, dude, man, I hated that guy. And given the pressure he was under and the pressure the team were under, and he is a reflective, nice man, maybe a little philosophical in his approach to things, he probably went and looked at it and went, you know what I'm doing isn't entirely working, so let's give this a shot. And that's the difference between a good manager and a bad manager, because a bad manager, they'll just continue doing the crap that they have been doing, whether it works or not. Or those guys that just change all the time, because that gives no continuity. And as such, I think he probably acquiesced to their requests based upon his own observations and reflections. So it may have been, again, speculating, just the perfect timing of when they brought things up, and maybe when he came to certain realizations. And so it just worked out. All in all, you have to say that Dortmund look happier playing right now than they have, for the second half of last season and for stretches of this season. It was also interesting to see, I don't remember where it was, but Favre completely losing his shit on the sideline at one point. And I don't think I had seen that side of him. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing for the players to see. And honestly, it's a good thing for the really annoying mainstream media to see, and for, the Twitter trolls to see, to be like, he cares. This isn't, this is an emotional person. He just bottles it and funnels it a little bit differently and channels it a little bit differently. So, again, adding to speculation, I think it was probably a combination of both, rather than him being put under pressure by the players and player power and all that kind of stuff. I think it's probably, it was good timing that both parties came to an agreement, so to speak.
Yeah, anyway, but I mean, I think Lucien Favre highlighted at the post-match conference really, how Dortmund, after suffering that 2-2 equalizer, then turned around and basically shook it off and scored another one. I thought that was quite amazing. And, also just kudos to, I think Reus was it in the end who played that pass to Sancho. Just these cutbacks is something that I want to see more often, to be honest, and is something Dortmund try a lot and sometimes don't really pull it off. But to find Sancho in the crowd of so many other players, Leipzig players, was quite nice. And I think this is the one mistake that, Gulaschi made, if you will, because I think that was savable. That shot wasn't really well placed, but it sort of, came off the palm of his hand or so. It just looked very, very awkward, and I think he could have done better. But, we have sort of skipped the 4-0 win against Mainz, and if we talk about goalkeeping mistakes, then I think we can talk more about Sentner and the shots he let in against, Hazard, and I think the Sancho goal also he could have also saved. I don't know, but I think we from the Mainz game there are a couple of things I would like to mention before we move on to Hoffenheim.
Yeah, makes sense. I think we've said everything we need to say about Leipzig match at this point. A 3-3 loss, but that's
we're only 50 minutes in.
I know.
What do you mean?
I
actually do have one last point, and it's just I'm haunted by long balls. Ever since the Champions League final, where Mats Hummels and Neven Subotic could not deal with it wasn't a simple long ball, but it was a long ball in the end against Ribéry and Robben. So when I see a punt, just, for the opponent to just, aimlessly punt the ball forward, I always sort of, I cringe. I don't know why, but, I told you at halftime that I feel like Leipzig will just try to punt more balls into the mixer or whatever you call it, just play more high area balls forward, because I think that's still a big Achilles heel of Dortmund. And
well, it's an Achilles heel for any top side. I mean, if you look at a lot of times, how do Manchester City or Liverpool get undone? It's a long ball over the top when they've transitioned to the offensive phase, and they just can't recover fast enough because there's a ton of space behind them. And, that's especially with Leipzig's pace.
I just wanted to say how much I hate it, and I wish we could ban them.
Yes, so. if we could ban, the kick and rush, that would be great. But for me, what was very interesting was, you had the older manager in Favre against the young manager Julian Nagelsmann, and for all of the tactical nuances and ingenuity and genius of Julian Nagelsmann, you have to say he pretty much got the game wrong, completely, and relying on direct pace, play into space, long ball type football. It's not exactly tactical genius. I would say when it comes to the tactical interpretation of the game and that battle from a coaching standpoint, Favre definitely won the game because you can't blame him for the 3 mistakes. And you definitely cannot give Julian Nagelsmann any credit for at least 2 of the 3 goals.
No, absolutely not. And I agree with you there. Absolutely. This, tactical battle was, very much won by Favre. And I have to say, Nagelsmann, I think, mitigated it in the second half, with his substitutions. And I think this is why Favre in the end brought on Piszczek, because you could see Nagelsmann trying to play more widely, more over the wings, because obviously in Dortmund's system, there is more space, because Leipzig usually try to play a lot through the middle. So yeah, he did better. And so if we talk about this coaching duel, I think the only criticism I really have to what Favre said he didn't bring on Alcázar for the last 20 minutes or so for Royce, because I think rotation is just very much needed, and we all know how much an impact player Paco Alcázar can be off the bench, even though he didn't play for quite a while. I don't care. You want to have a striker in there, because there were a couple of scenes where Dortmund probably would have scored had the likes of Hazard and Sancho or whoever more of a striker's instinct, and that was missing here and there, even in this game. So I just would have liked to see what would have changed, and I think Royce was pretty tired in the end anyway. So and now I think he is out against Hoffenheim because of a muscle injury. So this is maybe my only criticism, and I basically asked, I didn't know that Favre was only allowed 2 substitutions after the game, and people were like, you can't blame Favre for this. No, I'm not blaming Favre, but I still think it's valid to criticize him for this, because you have a lot of good players on that bench. So please utilize it to the full extent if possible. I can understand the reasoning why you don't want to change much, because overall the structure and the shape was working very well. And if you have an access of Julian Brandt and Marco Reus, anything can happen any single second. So I understand the reluctance, but I also think that Julian Brandt and Paco Alcázar could work out quite well in other games. So this is really the only thing that I would criticize, but also not too much, because I really want to highlight how amazing and how good Dortmund were. And I'm still starstruck a little bit and flabbergasted by how good this was, especially in the context of how shitty Dortmund were in recent weeks and months. And Favre was on the verge of being fired or on a hot seat at least. Watzke made a couple of threads basically saying if the results don't change, you gotta go. So sitting here now with this turnaround is just the best thing that could have happened to us. Seriously, I mean, obviously the Favre out camp is still somewhere, and I still don't think he is the best fit for this club, but by golly, is it good for him to still be there and Dortmund playing this well.
Well, I agree 100%. I mean, he's going to be there until the end of the season and maybe beyond, depending on how the second half of the season goes. I mean, if you look at how the opposition is doing, there's a little bit of a mini blueprint here on how to counteract Leipzig now, that Dortmund have shown. Yes, Bayern beat Freiburg 3-1, but I would say that was a lucky win for them. But it's Bayern. We're used to lucky wins occasionally because they're just that good. But they are not perfect.
Another long ball.
Correct.
For them.
Yep. And then obviously,
I hate long balls.
And then of course, Gladbach aren't a complete team, as was also highlighted in the Europa League exit. So there is definitely a momentum shift that can occur pretty quickly. Now we have a winter break coming up, but I think it's actually a good time for Dortmund because everybody can kind of get back up to speed and get healthy again, maybe bring in a an out-and-out striker, and refine some of the smaller issues that are still there over the course of the winter break. So I think it comes at a good time for Dortmund. It's not a bad time per se, but obviously it all depends on how things shape out against Hoffenheim. But of course, we'll probably see Sancho and definitely Reus won't play, and I'd be surprised if Sancho plays. That would be a little bit of a push, but that's for the Hoffenheim discussion. But you wanted to talk a little bit about Mainz.
Yes, and what I will say is Dortmund, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they play Zagadou? Because that was another amazing game by none other than Dan Axel Zagadou, and his 60-meter, 70-yard or whatever sprint it was, and then picking out Sancho for, I think it was a 2-0, right? The counterattack. That just sparked so much joy to my heart that we cannot leave this unmentioned. And it was also a nice goal, even though I still think it was savable. It was still countered to the direction that the goalkeeper was going to. So, just so well taken. And, just to have that grit of Zagadou to just see the open field and just, start marching forward. And, you could see that, the other attackers next to Zagadou weren't going on full sprint, or they would have all ran offside, but needed to stay level because, I mean, he's fast, but on the ball and with the ball, he's in the fastest. But nevertheless, that was just amazing to see. And obviously Dortmund, I think, added the 3-0 not much later. And then you had Torgan Hazard get yet another goal. So while we pretty much skimmed over this game, I think it's still not worthy that Dortmund finally executed some counterattacks, which is much needed, and I hope we see more. And B, as I mentioned before, this whole little wrestling match, because I thought Mainz had a good, strong opening 10-15 minutes. That game was a real shit show and not very easy on the ice. But then again, Dortmund gained control, and Adam Dorowski, friend of the pod, posted a picture of Roman Bürki, full highlights, and there was just a gif of him playing the ball to some player, just loosely kicking it in midfield, which really summed up how good this Dortmund team is, because I think Mainz then turned around and punished Bremen 5-0. So it's not like this team can't attack at all. So just to highlight again at what level Dortmund played in this week and in recent weeks, just not allowing a single shot on target by Mainz, who are feisty, I would say that, and can be very, very uncomfortable to have such a comfortable, delightful afternoon on a Saturday, and you just sit there and Dortmund are going to easily win this and bring the 3 points home and do something for the goal difference. That was simply delightful. So and it's also good to see that Achim Bayer-Lorza just had to downright admit after the game that there was just zero chance for him. He said like, oh, well, we tried our best. It's not that our team didn't do everything for this, but Dortmund were just too flexible and we didn't have an answer. So this is basically waving the white flag. And as I said before in the shito pantsometer, this is exactly what I want to see, is that other teams just accept defeat and give up. And the ultimate goal of domination. So here we are.
Well, I mean,
very good 4-0 win.
Yeah, it was comfortable. It was inevitable at one point. And I like Achim Bayer-Lorza. I think he's really turned Mainz around. They've played well, and they just got completely beaten, outplayed. What I liked about him was, we've had matches before where the opposition manager, even after getting their ass kicked, would somehow, maybe blame a ref, or we were unlucky, or we had plenty of opportunities. I remember, various press conferences after the match where you looked at the opposition coach and went, really? Were we at the same game? So you got unlucky. Okay. And Bayer-Lorza, like you said, was basically like, well, they're just too good for us. And Dortmund are significantly better than Mainz, than Düsseldorf. and I believe significantly better than their upcoming opponent, who are though then better than a Düsseldorf or a Mainz. So, it closes the gap a little bit. But it was perfect. The buildup that we had, and I mentioned it previously, of Düsseldorf, Slavia Prague, and Mainz, was a good build up to Leipzig and then Hoffenheim. Gain some confidence, play against uncomfortable, difficult sides, so that when you're playing against a Leipzig or also a Hoffenheim, even though Hoffenheim are a little bit more passive in their approach, it doesn't feel as uncomfortable. You've faced it before and you can play around it. And so it was perfect. It was I was so relaxed watching that game Saturday morning, a cup of coffee in my hand, just chilling, watching it with the kids. It was just nice, and my wife even said, "Oh, I like it when Dortmund plays like that because you're in such a good mood for the rest of the day." That's the downside about 7:30 a.m. Kickoff times in the U.S., because if it's the 4-4 against Schalke, if we think about that, needless to say, I was not really in the mood for the rest of the day at that point. But this is nice. It was positive. It was honestly, it was a stroll in the park after 20-30 minutes. That's nice to see. Comfortable wins are good, Stefan.
Yes, they are. I love them. More of it, please. So, I think we can now move on to the Hoffenheim game. And, it's very close to Christmas. I just had my 30th birthday not too long ago. So, Matthias, I would like to make a wish. And the wish is, I'm very pissed off about Dortmund having to play on Friday after, Champions League and all that. And especially away to Hoffenheim in this schedule. So my wish is, can you please put my pissed offness into a nice little crisp rant?
Me to rant about scheduling Borussia Dortmund on a Friday after playing basically Englische Wochen for what seems like a month and a half.
Yeah, well, everyone gets to chillax another day.
Yeah, it just it obviously gives an advantage to everybody else in the title hunt, because needless to say, Hoffenheim are not in a hunt for much of anything, in my opinion. I think they're going to find their form in mid-table. It's let's call it frustrating. I would venture to guess, even though I'm sure someone will prove me wrong, that this probably would not happen to Bayern. If they play on a Tuesday after a lot of midweek matches that they have to play on a Friday subsequently. Yes, theoretically they have the same amount of time off because they played on a Wednesday, so they're playing on a Saturday, so that kind of defeats my argument.
No, it doesn't. It does not, because they had another day off between the other games.
That's true.
So this is another rest day they had that Dortmund don't have. So no, this argument is not defeated.
Good. I'm glad. I'm not wrong.
Themselves very much hard, because I'm fucking pissed, because I want to have a fucking happy win at the end of the Hinrunde. I don't want to go into my Christmas, into my winter. I don't want to go with a big fat L or a draw or whatever, which is going to be frustrating as fuck. And we all know Dortmund struggle as per usual in Hoffenheim. So you have Dortmund playing in Hoffenheim, you have Felix Zweier as the referee, which already bodes fucking disaster for Dortmund, and then you play at this shit team and a fucking Friday after, 5-4 English weeks. I can't. Dortmund's roster is pretty tired. Favre has hardly rotated, so there were injuries too. So this is going to be a very ugly game for Dortmund, and I really do fear the worst, that Hoffenheim, after slumping about and being all shit and not really filling the stadium or doing anything nice, now turn around for this one game, which is their game of the season or whatever, in their last home game, where they want to show the fans off and all the hate. And we all know Dortmund always shit the bed the most against team I don't like. So here we fucking go. This is going to be yet another shit show, and I put this squarely on the Deutsche Fußballliga. If this does not end into 3 points in Dortmund. If Dortmund win, it's great. I get to sit on the couch and see everyone else fail the next 2 days, but this is annoying me to the end of time that this draw happens on a Friday night after so little recuperation and all the things that Dortmund went through. It just shows the disrespect of a team that's just qualified in the frickin' Champions League in a group with Inter Milan and Barcelona, where they really, against I think Spanish and Italian and Czech table leaders, if that still holds true. I haven't checked Serie A standings in recent times, but nevertheless, an amazing achievement. And this is how you thank Dortmund with this shit show of a scheduling. I am very appalled, and I know that the timeline doesn't quite hold up to what I just said, but nevertheless, I am pissed.
Well, I mean,
am really fucking pissed to hand Hoffenheim this golden advantage on a silver platter for no absolutely fucking reason other than you need to give DAZN or whatever one last good game. But out of this match day, you could have picked so many other fixtures, which is not the Dortmund game. So please spare me, DFL. Please spare me. You could have picked, I don't know, Bayern against Wolfsburg, which is a nice game, or Fortuna Düsseldorf against Union Berlin, who play now on Sunday. This is the perfect Friday game. Just highlighted, relegation battle. Isn't that nice? So why the hell does Dortmund have to play on a Friday night on December 20th? Just fuck everyone involved in this decision. Middle fingers everywhere. Sorry, you can rant, but
you get to edit that. Well, the funny thing is, well, not funny. It's not funny, but it harkens back to, I can't remember if it was Zorc or Watzke with a kind of softer mini rant about the scheduling that Dortmund have to play away after every Champions League match. The way the scheduling worked out. And that was already the first critique point, like, what the hell? Nobody else is doing that. Why are we doing that? And this kind of falls into that same thing because I'm sorry. Why are Union Berlin and Fortuna Düsseldorf getting a Sunday game? It's kind of a...
they also both played on Tuesday.
Yeah.
They get 2 extra days of rest.
I'm sorry. That's where you have to think about it as a DFL. And I know these schedules get made months in advance, but you have to look at it in all... And if anybody accuses this of big team bias arrogance, okay, fine. And I'm okay with that, because screw you. Who's going to advance German football more? Fortuna Düsseldorf and Union Berlin or Borussia fucking Dortmund? In that situation, who do you want to be at the top of their game at any given time with the most amount of rest? Do you want it to be Fortuna Düsseldorf or Union Berlin who are going to play in the second Bundesliga in a couple of seasons again? Or is it Borussia Dortmund, who you need to be a standard bearer internationally beside Bayern and the crap out of Leipzig? So great. Now you've got me all worked up. I appreciate that. But it kind of plays into that where it's like, no, this isn't what you need. This isn't what you want. Dortmund are going to make, in my opinion, chicken salad out of chicken shit. And I think they're going to kick the shit out of Hoffenheim because, in my opinion, 2 players are going to come onto the pitch in Mario Götze and Paco Alcácer, who are both pissed, who both have something to prove. And I think that will bode well for Dortmund and very poorly for Hoffenheim. I think on top of that, you will have Nico Schulz play, who looked good again at the wingback position. And I wouldn't be surprised if Piszczek plays for Hakimi, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if Piszczek plays for Hakimi and Hakimi plays for Sancho, given his pace. But I think Dortmund will win. I think it won't be easy because Hoffenheim, it's a good coach and stuff like that. But I'm not worried about a loss or a draw in this match, to be perfectly honest. I know our track record against Hoffenheim in Hoffenheim, but that's more when there's something on the line, like possibly getting them freaking relegated from quite a few years ago, when Dortmund could have sent this abomination from Hoffenheim into the Zweite Bundesliga and were incapable of doing that. But there's nothing really at stake in this match. It's not like for Hoffenheim. It seems to be it only screws up when there's something at stake for Hoffenheim. They're a mid-table team and they will be no more than that this season. So I think Dortmund will win. It won't be easy. The atmosphere will be crap because it's Zinsheim. But the point of the rant is still perfectly valid in that I maintain the DFL would not have scheduled this for Bayern, and maybe not even for Leipzig, because, money speaks.
Yes. That's good old conspiracy podcast here now, but that's also Dietmar Hopp's influence on the DFL and his billionaire money. It's evil. It's corrupting the fairness of the Deutsche Fußballliga. This is what's going on here, folks.
That's right. We're going off the deep end a little bit now, so just bear with us here.
Come on, it's Christmas. Let's have some fun.
Well, I'll be honest. If Erling Haaland ends up at Leipzig, that just proves how corrupt that entire system is. Because, Are you kidding me? I mean, there is literally no. If somebody says he's going there for Nagelsmann, it's whatever. Nagelsmann is not Pep Guardiola, and the players that go to Manchester City don't go because of Pep. They go because Manchester City just spends a ton of corrupt oil money on them. It's no different at Leipzig. They're going there because of money and because of the way things are being handled behind closed doors. If you don't believe me, I would recommend you to read Football Leaks. I think it's also available in English. I've read the German version, or, if you want to go really deep, go, read FIFA Mafia. That's even better. But it is there. It does exist. And you can't tell me that does not play into certain decision making, whether it's transfers or scheduling, because it's a little egregious this first half of the season, how Dortmund have been negatively, I'm not going to say they were disadvantaged in the scheduling. I mean, playing away matches after every single Champions League tie, and then having this Tuesday-Friday matchup. I mean, I'm sorry, the DFL should know better than that. And it's one of two things, Stefan. It's either there's a level of conspiracy corruption in there, or they're just that fucking stupid.
So anyway, Hoffenheim are 9th place.
On that note,
have 7 wins, 3 draws, 6 losses, and are 6 points behind Dortmund. Dortmund have 30 points, Hoffenheim 24, and have a goal difference of -4. And after before beating Union Berlin 2-0, they have not won the 4 previous games. They had a loss against Mainz. They lost 5-1 to Mainz and had a 1-1 draw against Düsseldorf. And then 3-1 loss to Hoffenheim, to Leipzig, same thing. And then another quite crunching loss to FC Augsburg at home, 2-4. So they are not the best team, as you just mentioned. But they have also been one of the most inconsistent teams, I think, in this league. I mean, as I just mentioned, they have only one less loss than Dortmund, and so they had a couple of very good results, and they can be a stumbling block. But I also don't feel like Hoffenheim have yet found their way after Nagelsmann, and also their system. That's just, if you look at Skoff, who is playing as their midfielder, number 10 or whatever, I think he was signed as a striker from Denmark, and I was contemplating adding him to my fantasy team because he has done what basically Lucas Barrios did before Dortmund signed him from Colo Colo. He just had an outrageous scoring thing. So maybe someone will correct me and tell me he was not playing as a striker, but I remember that he was playing as a forward. So it's just very, very easy to see that not everything has been completely figured out at Hoffenheim yet. So my big hope is, while I think they have a lot of good players and a very good functioning team. That the loss of Nagelsmann and also of Amiri and the other guy that I just can't think of, Demirbay, will help Dortmund to win this game, even if Dortmund are on their last legs now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Dortmund, the players that will come in, again, I wouldn't be Nico Schulz, returned quote unquote home, even though obviously Zinsheim and Hoffenheim are at the same time.
Utilize the curse of the X.
That's right. That's right. I think Dortmund will win it. I'm not even concerned that Dortmund won't win it. Let's put it to you that way. It's not overconfidence. I just looking at how both the trajectory of both teams. Yes, they beat Union Berlin, but taking trajectory of both teams and where they are in their Findungsprozess, so we would say in German, where they're trying to figure out who they are and which way they go. I think Dortmund is settled. Favre knows. He knows the tactics. He knows the approach. The team knows it. And Hoffenheim, like you said, are still trying to figure it out a little bit. And there is a significant quality difference between the two, in my opinion. Yes, Hoffenheim have a little bit of advantage because they're a little bit more rested. They're playing less matches overall. But I think the players that will come in, again, I expect Nico Schulz. I expect Paco Alcácer and or Mario Götze to play in this match. And then probably Piszczek and maybe then Hakimi moves up forward, which he's perfectly capable of doing. So I think Dortmund will win this. I think other than that, you're not going to change anything else. Brandt and Weigl and Hazard and the back three will stay the same because why not? As such, I think Dortmund have more than enough to win it. And even though Hoffenheim aren't a bad side and they will have their moments and their chances and Buki will be tested and the back line will be tested, I think the final result and score line will look maybe a little bit more comfortable than large stretches of the match will be.
Well, I must say I will be, well, I guess positively surprised because I never get that Hoffenheim monkey off my back. I don't know. For some reason, I feel like the universe just can't allow Dortmund to win games there. So I'm very cautiously optimistic. I appreciate your optimism. What I would say is that Skov right now is I think playing as a left back. So I'm just looking at the lineup of their starting 11 against Union Berlin, and I would say this, the double pivot of Samaseku and Grilic is something that I personally quite like. I think it's a very good mix, and it's interesting that they play Sebastian Rudi is more of a number 10, we're still in the defensive midfield. I think that's a position that suits him in certain systems and can inflict a lot of damage because of his physicality and ball winning skills. So it's bit much like playing Sebastian Rode there for a certain reason and purpose. So I think this helps you out when you play against teams that are better than you. And Kramaric is, I think, a very good striker. And I think Ilyas Bebu, a very pacey winger on the right wing. So I think Hoffenheim do have their weapons to hurt Dortmund in certain ways. And I feel like long balls will once again be a theme of that night. So and I think it's going to be very crunchy. So if Dortmund want to win this game, I think they need to channel their own feistiness that they showed against Hertha Berlin, because Hoffenheim are still a very physical team and Dortmund will need to find ways to counter that. So I think this needs to be, they really need to squeeze everything out that is left in them, which is, I think, not a lot, because Favre really did not rotate much, which makes it, as I previously ranted, all the more tougher for Dortmund to get this kind of intensity level onto the field again. But here's hoping that Dortmund can maybe cruise to another win as they did against Mainz, simply by cudgeling or bludgeoning Hoffenheim not with just their physique, but also just with the good combination play. I really hope that even with the change in personnel, that Dortmund can maintain that level of playing. And my hope is that Julian Brandt, who probably will be tired, can maintain that level, and Julian Weigl helps in that, because in the end, when we look at all the games that Dortmund succeeded recently, we have to say they have done a tremendous job of having either Brandt or Weigl open, and always having this sort of hub to play around and then really move the ball quickly, and with that move the chains of the opponent. And that has helped for them to have a lot of control, and with that minimizing the risk of stupid counterattacks and that sort of stuff. And also, just creating opportunities for themselves. So it's been good defensive and attacking position all in once, I would say, with this combination. So I'm quite happy, and I'm very hopeful that Dortmund can show this one again. And obviously, if you have Zagadou in your team in this form, there's just another X factor that Hoffenheim, who usually play just with one striker, might not be able to cope with again. Here's hoping. So that's my 2 cents on the game. So I'm not underestimating Hoffenheim one bit, even though they have been quite poor and mediocre in recent weeks. But I know this team is capable of shocking Dortmund in ways that are maybe unconventional, but nevertheless, very uncomfortable sometimes.
Okay, so what do you think the final score will be?
I think Dortmund will grind this one out. I think that's going to be a 2-1 win for Dortmund.
I'm going to go with a 3-1 win and some contentious decisions because of the previously mentioned referee.
Felix Zweier, yes.
Who,
still on my shit list.
if you want to find out more about Zweier and why he's a controversial referee, just Google it. You'll find it. There's no point in going into it anymore here. But I think Dortmund will win 3-1.
Okay. Yeah, I can live with that. So, Matthias, I think that sort of wraps up our preview. I like that we spent such a long time on the Leipzig game, because it was such an extraordinary game, and I think a lot of people already had dubbed it the game of the season, at least so far, because it was so exhilarating, and so and Dortmund were so good for most stages, and it's nice to end this season, or this first half of the season, on a high note, after a lot of complaining and bitching and negativity, also on your and my part. So it's good that we've all been wrong, and Dortmund can actually do something. So I'm just very happy. So toward the holidays, the Christmas, this is always positive. So I really do pray that Dortmund can eke another 3 points out before the winter break, because otherwise I will be a little bit pissed. So we don't want that. So please win. That's all I'm going to say. So Matthias, once again, thank you for coming on. And if you have any final thoughts, now's the time.
Well, always a pleasure. No real final thoughts, aside from one thing. Just so you know, I've started blocking more people on Twitter. If you're going to be an asshole, you're going to get blocked. So, find a different hobby. But for everybody else, you can find me on Twitter at Matthias Zug.
Yeah, find yourself blocked on Twitter at Matthias Zug. Okay, so on that note, you can find me at Stefan Butzko. I usually don't block people unless they are homophobic or racist. So if you find yourself blocked, you must have said something very horrible or just been trying to antagonize me. But that usually doesn't happen. So I'm not as quick with that mute button, but sometimes it does happen. Anywho, so at Stefan Butzko, you can follow me on Twitter if you want to follow all of us and not get blocked. At Yellowwallpod on Facebook and Twitter is the name. And our written content, which I apologize, has been a little bit more sparse because Q4 has put a little bit more work on my plate. then you go to theyellowwall.net, where you can also find all the ways to subscribe to this not ranty podcast and not conspiratorial podcast, which is obviously iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or YouTube. And please subscribe, rate, and share. This is what helps us out the most, because there's still people out there who are lifetime Dortmund fans, have never heard of us. So please, that's the biggest help. And if you want to sponsor an episode, get a shout out for yourself or the fan club or whatever, please pitch in $10 on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/theyellowwall, and you will find all more information there. If not, shoot us an email at yellowwallpod@gmail.com. And I think that's it. And we shall be back, I hope, before Christmas. I mean, we have a whole weekend now, thanks to the DFL, to discuss the podcast. So, the Hoffenheim game, if we're willing. If not, for whatever reason, I wish everyone out there a happy or Merry Christmas. And to you, Matthias, obviously as well. And as always, thank you for listening, and goodbye.